Hello everyone and good morning. First for 67 Hail Hail, a video at 9:30, and there's loads of you who are keen to watch a video today. It seems Neil Lennon is no longer the Celtic manager. Of course you know that by now. In case you've been sleeping for the last 13 or 14 hours, I'll just quickly fill you in with what's happened. It was the Scottish Sun last night who had the scoop. Although at that stage there were no reports of it being a resignation. Then Celtic this morning, I think about 7:30, posted a statement. In that statement they did the typical Celtic thing of writing a lot but not actually saying a hell of a lot, although the main thing they did say was pretty profound. Celtic Football Club today announced that Neil Lennon has resigned from his position as football manager with immediate effect. They also confirmed that John Kennedy will take interim charge of the team. There were then some quotes, quite flattering quotes from Neil Lennon himself and Peter Lawwell. So the big news is, of course, that Neil Lennon is no longer the Celtic manager. John, hi.
Hi.
My question to you is, why now?
Yeah, that's the question some people will be asking themselves. There's only 8 games left until the end of the season. Why not just wait until then? But I think for many supporters it had become increasingly clear that Neil Lennon felt like a barrier to progress, and I think this steps I think he was going at the end of the season anyway, but I think this step's not so much a footballing one for between now and the end of the season, but more part of rebuilding the relationship with supporters and letting everyone know that this season hasn't been acceptable and that there has to be consequences for it and there has to be change. So I think this is the first step of that. I think this is a process. If anyone thinks that Neil Lennon going automatically solves all Celtic's problems, they're sorely mistaken. But as the first step on a process towards change, proper change this year, then I think it had to be done now. It had to be done before the club set out their vision for next season, because Neil Lennon's press conferences and interviews were becoming increasingly bizarre when he was talking about building for next season and talking about being in charge for the summer. So the club had to make it clear that that wasn't going to happen.
The cynic in me is thinking that season ticket renewal forms are coming out soon, and that is perhaps one of the reasons they've done it. The article that we got from the Sun last night seemed to suggest that they'd been in crisis talks ever since the defeat to Ross County, as if this was our first horrendous result of the season. Of course, Neil Lennon should ironically probably have gone after the last defeat to Ross County, so it was a county defeat that did for him at the end, but not the one we expected. We'll kind of talk a wee bit more about Lennon in a wee minute, but in terms of the news that John Kennedy is going to be placed in interim charge, we don't know how long that's going to last. What's your immediate reaction to that part of the story?
I've got no issue with John Kennedy being in interim charge until the end of the season. Celtic need a fresh start, so John Kennedy isn't the answer as permanent manager, regardless of what the Celtic's plans are or regardless of how he does between now and the end of the season. Like I say, Celtic need a fresh start, but as an interim manager, I don't really have a problem with it. There's been a little bit of outcry from some sections of supporters, people who aren't happy with it, but I think there's a few myths about John Kennedy that people don't really realise. One of them, first and foremost, is that people think he's the defensive coach, which isn't true. He's just a first-team coach, in the same way that Johan Mjällby wasn't our defensive coach during Lennon's first reign, in the same way that John Collins wasn't our midfielder coach. It doesn't work like that. So I understand that there's kind of a bit of worry there, but over the 8 games, it's not really about John Kennedy. I don't think he's in the running for the permanent manager post, and there'll be speculation about it. And people forget that he is a well-regarded coach. People think that he's not, but Damien Duff speaks very highly of him, and Celtic supporters seem to like Damien Duff. He was the first choice for the Hibs job last year, ahead of Jack Ross. A lot of people forget that. So over the next 3 months, there's no problem. I've got no problem with John Kennedy being an interim in charge. But again, he's another who needs to go and find his own path in football, I think, in the summer.
So you think he wouldn't go into a kind of backroom role again after being caretaker manager? You think that would be him at Celtic?
I think so. Just now, I think he needs to go out and prove himself as a manager somewhere else. I think he probably has ambitions to do that. And the next few months is a great addition for that. If he does well at Celtic over the next few months, he probably could land a pretty high-profile job in Scotland, I would suggest.
Yeah, I think John Kennedy, like most at Celtic, have been quite damaged by what's happened over the last week while. He certainly had a higher reputation when Brendan Rodgers left the club a couple of years ago. He was part of that team that led us to so many trophies. It's hard to know what influence John Kennedy has had this season because we never get an insight from Celtic into what the various relationships were between Kennedy and Lennon and Strachan as well. I think it's interesting Strachan has been kept on. I certainly can't see him being part of the next regime that happens next season. Do you think we're missing an opportunity by keeping Kennedy in charge until the end of the season? And the reason I say that is Brendan Rodgers went to Leicester in the month of February. We're currently in the month of February. They got a few months, 2 or 3 months out of him where he got to know his squad and almost make mistakes with not too much pressure on him in that initial few months, and then gear up for the following season where they started on fire. Should we be looking to do the same now between now and the end of the season? Get a manager in as soon as possible who can evaluate the players and get us ready for next season, as opposed to having Kennedy as a stopgap?
I think if there's a long-term choice out there, we should at least announce it before the end of the season. I understand the thinking of getting a manager in now and getting his feet in the door, but it just depends what they want to do and whether they're available now or whether they're available in the summer, or how much transition needs to happen. They could be coming from abroad. We don't really know what Celtic's plans are for the manager's position. I think that whoever comes in, I think we need to aim high here, and I think we need to get someone who brings in their own staff and their own coaching unit, someone who knows how to run the entire football department, rather than installing just a figurehead. And that also needs to come in conjunction with the director of football stuff, which we know is also ongoing behind the scenes at the club. So it could be the case of a director of football comes in first, and then a coach and coaching staff coming after that. Or it could be done together. The club have a variety of options now, but I think with Neil Lennon going, what it does is it opens up options. I think Lennon being there was closing off a lot of options in terms of how the club can communicate with supporters and plan for next season. And as I say, this is just the first step on the process. But I understand what you're saying. I don't think it matters too much in terms of next season, though. What you're saying.
I suppose Brendan Rodgers and Martin O'Neill came in and led us to probably the two best seasons that we've had in the 21st century in their first years at the club, and they came in the summer. They didn't have an induction period prior to that. What have you made of the overall supporters' reaction to the news of Neil Lennon's sacking? Have you been surprised by how, I don't want to use the word vitriolic, but the frustrations that are still there in the support?
Look, people are celebrating this decision because it's about 5 months overdue. I mean, it's not about Lennon. I don't think it's particularly personal. At least it's not for me. The reason I'm happy about this news is because this is something that helps Celtic get better, I believe, in the short term, medium term and long term. And I think this decision had to be made months ago. I don't think supporters should generally ever celebrate when a manager has to go, because it means that you've failed, and essentially this is a failed season. But I think the fact that supporters are celebrating it just shows you how overdue this decision was and how long the club have sat in their hands. That's the way I see it, anyway.
Yeah, I think that sums it up. We've probably celebrated this news more than anything this season, other than that daft penalty shootout we had against Hearts in the Scottish Cup final, and that probably just tells us how far we've fallen this season and how disappointing a season it has been. In terms of moving forward, the right approach that I think we've kind of come to on the channel is that you would appoint a director of football first, who would then oversee the appointment of the manager. But it's a difficult situation because Peter Lawwell's serving his notice here at Celtic. We've not got Dominic Mackay in yet. We hear mumblings that Dominic Mackay's been involved in certain parts of the club. I'd certainly be surprised if he hadn't been. Do you think we'll see movement on the director of football front in the near future? Because season tickets are still coming around, and I do feel, as much as the news has been positive today for most fans, the support still need to hear more, because there will still be people in the support that are worried that the club are going to take a cheap option and appoint a Strachan or a Kennedy or someone like that in the summer.
I think this all might happen quite quickly. I don't mean I don't even necessarily mean over the next week, but I think certainly over the next month or so, I think we should have a clearer direction of where Celtic are heading. I still think the club can do more to, communicate and speak to supporters over the next while. Like, I don't think it's good enough for Peter Lawwell to have 3 sentences in a club statement and that's all we're going to get. We need video interviews, we need real tangible vision of where the club is going, and whether that's Dominic Mackay or not, there's nothing stopping him doing an interview. There's nothing stopping him doing a video statement. I know he's not officially part of the club until the 1st of July, but he's the incoming CEO. He's the man that people want to hear from. So the club need to get a grip of this quite quickly, and what happens is silence creates a vacuum and it gets filled with speculation, rumour. And in a season such as this, often that rumour can be slanted negatively. It's up to Celtic to produce a positive vision of the club going forward. And that's something they haven't been able to do for a while now. And that's what I'm looking for as much as anything over the next wee while.
Yeah, I said that earlier in the week. I would love to hear from Dominic Mackay because he's the guy who's going to be leading this club forward. I know he's currently employed by Scottish Rugby and I know he's got his hands full there, but I would love to hear from him. What are your plans for the future? You don't need to go in depth, but just give us a general idea. Just speak to the Celtic support. And I'm just so pleased that he doesn't have to come into the club when Neil Lennon is still there, because I think that would have been a pretty tough initiation for him. And as you say, the whole Neil Lennon issue was clouding everything and it was covering everything at the club. He can now come in, hopefully, with a clean slate. But I'd love to hear from him before that. Right, should we do the fun chat then and chat about potential new managers? Because we can officially do that, John. Not as if we haven't been doing that. And we kind of had a few videos and articles going out, I think, in November, December time. Let us know in the comments who you would like. There's just been a shout for Barkas as a new Celtic manager. A few people mentioning the fella whose name escaped me now, the Red Bull guy, Ralph Rangnick. Rafa Benitez, Eddie Howe, Roberto Martinez, maybe Lampard. Well, Derek Eccles is certainly setting his bar high. I've nailed my colours to the mast on social media. A guy called Gerardo Soiani. I should say I'm going to be putting out a video later on today that's going to be 7 ambitious young appointments Celtic could make, so that should be fun. I've not recorded it yet, but he's my number one. He's probably unrealistic. He's doing an amazing job at young boys. He's probably going to follow their path and end up in the Bundesliga, but he has all the credentials. He's won trophies. He's performed well in Europe with a club that's smaller than Celtic. Who's your number one candidate if I was to ask you now? Do you have one?
I don't think I have one. I think I've got an idea of what kind of manager I want. I want someone who's tactically astute, and I want someone who takes the coaching himself. Does that make sense? Lennon doesn't take the coaching and doesn't. I feel like we need a manager who's right in there amongst it on a day-to-day basis and takes the training and is involved with the tactics and has his own analytic people, has his own tactical analysis people. And I think that's what I want. And, I'm not particularly saying Rafa Benitez because I think it's quite outlandish, but Rafa Benitez comes with his own team. Do you know what I mean? Brendan Rodgers comes with his own team. You're not just appointing Brendan Rodgers, you're appointing a unit. And I think that's probably what we need on the coaching side of things. So that's the style of manager that I want. I also think the club should aim as high as possible. I don't think there's any limit to, like, as fan speculation, sometimes you put out a name and someone pipes up and goes, oh, that'll never happen. It doesn't matter as fans, we're entitled to dream and wish, and I think that the club should be aiming as high as possible. And whether some unrealistic names come into that, then so be it. I'd rather aim high than settle for second best. And nobody really expected Brendan Rodgers to come to the club before he did. He just come off the Liverpool job. So there's no reason why we can't attract a manager of a high quality. But yeah, I do think it needs to be someone coming in with their own staff and who is day to day on the training pitch and with the players, making decisions constantly.
It's exciting though, isn't it? Like this is what's happened when they've sacked Lennon or Lennon's resigned, whatever the state of play was. We've now got a situation where we can be hopeful about the end of the season, and the end of the season is still going to be a bit of a slog in general because I think a lot of these players are eyeing up their next move. But there's going to be discussion about the new manager. There's going to be discussion about new players. I would certainly hope that John Kennedy is going to learn from some of the mistakes that Neil Lennon made in regards to team selection, and I'd hope Barkas will be right back in the team, for example. It'll be interesting to see if that does happen. Will Ayeti get more of a run? Players like Klamala, Ewan Henderson, will we see more of these players? James Forrest obviously going to be coming back, but we've got an exciting-ish into the season, not necessarily on the pitch, but we can be a bit excited about it. I think you're right about setting the bar high. People always have this temptation to play down Celtic and say, oh, you play in Scotland and why would Rafa Benitez want to come and go to Inverness? And I don't think Rafa Benitez will come to Celtic. I don't think that will happen. But in terms of setting the bar high and going after managers who have done well in good leagues in Europe and are growing in terms of reputation, Celtic can still offer managers a lot. In a normal world, we have 60,000 fans at home games. You have the lure of just being across the border from England, so you're right in the limelight in terms of how they're concerned. You've got the possibility of Champions League football. We're going to be in the Champions League next year. It's a huge ask to get to the group stage, but we're still there. You've got, for me, the biggest derby certainly in Europe, where you can test yourself, and of course you can win trophies and you'll be absolutely loved. There's a mention there in the comments of the Rennes manager. I think Julien Stéphane was his name, and immediately I was thinking, it's probably unrealistic given that, I think they were in the Champions League this year. I think they're having a really good season in France. But Celtic are a bigger club than Rennes. Why couldn't we go for a manager like that? I've got a few more names on the video later today, and people may go, oh, that won't happen. But, let's big ourselves up a wee bit here. We are Celtic.
I agree. And, it's not for us to be realistic. The club, we don't know what budget the club are thinking of. We don't really know what philosophy the club are thinking of. It's fun to talk about these big names and about these young managers around Europe, and I do agree that Celtic is still a draw, and I think much of that comes from the progress that we could make on the European scene, not just in the Champions League but in the Europa League as well. I think if a manager sees us as a stepping stone, I think that's fine, as long as it's over a 3 to 5 year period, not just the season. I don't have a problem with, Celtic are a big club known around Europe, around the world, and there's no reason why we should be settling for a lesser candidate just because this season hasn't gone well. It doesn't really work like that, and I think the potential of Celtic is much bigger than what we're currently getting out of it. We've got good players to work with. Relative to obviously other teams in the division, we've got a massive budget to work with. And yeah, I totally agree with you. We shouldn't be limiting ourselves to anyone.
Jack McFarlane there saying that we talk about Seville as if it will never happen again, and I think that's a pretty pertinent point. When you see some of the teams in Europe that have made it to the latter rounds of the Europa League, Shakhtar Donetsk, Salzburg, other teams of that ilk, I think a few Belgian teams have done it. There is no reason why Celtic can't be a superpower again. Well, superpower is maybe overstating it, but a decent side in Europe. But in context, we have just lost to Ross County, and we are 20 odd points behind Rangers.
But I mean, Nick, there's two sides to it. I mean, obviously domestic football is our bread and butter, but that glare of Europe, it does exist, and we can't just dismiss it, and it is achievable to make inroads in Europe, and that's part of being Celtic. And we know Celtic supporters value European football very highly. Even the Europa League in recent years, the stadium's been jam-packed full. Hundreds of pounds extra on top of your season ticket. So the fans, there's a hunger there for Celtic to progress in Europe. It's not an afterthought, and that might appeal to a manager on the continent. You don't know. And I think there's big changes also coming to UEFA competitions over the next 2 years, and I believe that factors into the club's planning over the next 5 year period. We don't really know what the Champions League's going to look like or what the access route will be. I'm assuming it'll be some raw deal for Celtic, as it always is, but there's a chance that we could be a little bit more heavily involved there, or the secondary competition might be a bit more lucrative. So there's big things on the horizon, and Celtic's a good club for a manager to be at, I believe. Celtic's kind of one of those ones where the Celtic is what a manager makes of it. Like if you come in to Celtic and you have a small time mentality, and you don't do a successful job, it can quickly evaporate and implode, as we've seen with Neil Lennon. But if you come as a manager with ambition and you've got you have a belief in your own ability to make inroads in Europe and be a modern kind of forward-thinking manager, then Celtic could be a huge club under a new manager, I believe. But that's just the way I see it. But obviously, I'm a biased, hopeful Celtic fan.
But that's the thing, we're all hopeful now, and 24 hours ago there was no hope at all, and that's what today's announcement has done. So that's the positive note that we'll leave you with. John, I believe you're off today, but I know the other writers at 67 Hail Hail will have plenty of content out on the website.
A lot of opinion will be out there today, just laying out what we want for the club over the next period. I think it'll be more opinion than news, and the news is done. But if you want an insight into what we think the club should be doing over the next few months, or what might happen next at Celtic, then 67hailhail.com is the place to be.
Definitely, we've got the forum as well, forum.67hailhail.com. As I mentioned earlier, we will have another video going out today. I'm going to take a look at 7 up-and-coming ambitious appointments that Celtic could make. Thanks everyone for tuning into this video. If you're a first-time viewer of the channel, please feel free to give us a wee subscribe. Just click the button, it'd be massively appreciated, and we'll speak to you soon. Take care everyone, and hail hail.